Hi, it's Ray from IELTS Focus. So I just thought I'd put together a quick lesson here about the speaking test in IELTS. And this is about 10 common myths in the speaking test. I often hear these kind of things from students or people who are studying IELTS, and they have concerns and anxieties about what they've heard. Maybe they've heard it on the internet or they've heard it from certain teachers. But have a look at the video, see what you think. There's also some advice on how you can improve your speaking at home for free, actually. So take a look at the video. If you have any questions or comments, put them in the box below the video and I'll get back to you on that. So, okay, let's take a look. Okay, let's take a look at the lesson. So we're going to look at 10 common myths about IELTS speaking. So there's a lot of misinformation out there about the best way to get a good band score in IELTS, especially in the speaking section. And some IELTS teachers themselves, they have differing views, and some people just give the wrong information. So this short lesson should clear up the confusion. Let's take a look at the first one, which is I must have a British accent to get a good band score. And I've heard this a few times before, actually. Now, your accent doesn't matter unless it's interfering with your overall pronunciation or it's difficult for the examiner to understand you. In fact, you should be focused more on clear, direct communication instead of trying to emulate a British accent. You don't get a higher band score for sounding like a native speaker or sounding British. So don't worry about your accent. As long as it's clear and the examiner can understand you, that's fine. Idioms are important for getting a high band score. I've heard people say stuff like, memorize as many idioms as you can and you'll get a band 9. Well, no, that's not true. Actually, idioms, they can go against you and you may end up with a lower band score, because the thing about idioms is that you must know their precise meaning and you must know how to use them naturally. So if you do decide to use them, you've got to know how to use them well and naturally. So actually, I advise against using idioms in the speaking section and of course the writing section. Probably better to develop your vocabulary with collocations and know how to use collocations effectively, because they're more important in IELTS. I need to use a wide range of grammatical structures. So you don't have to impress the examiner with a wide range of grammar. You should be focused on precision and answering the question directly and naturally. So for example, maybe in part 3 of the test, there's a question about comparing the past and the present. In your answer, you just use comparatives. You compare the past and the present. It's quite simple. You don't have to put 10 different grammatical structures in your answer. Or for example, maybe you're asked a hypothetical question, then you reply with the second conditional. So the grammar that you use depends on the question being asked. It's actually quite simple, quite straightforward. I have to give many examples and I need to be an expert on the topic. Now, if you think that you should have interesting, smart ideas or that you should be an expert on the topic, then you're giving yourself unnecessary pressure, because actually the most obvious ideas are the best. The first thing that comes to your mind is usually fine. It's better to focus also on one main idea. So again, in part 3 of the speaking test, this is where you have to talk in more detail. Just think of one example, one main idea, and support it and develop it, rather than talking about lots of different points or different examples or trying to overly impress. So keep it simple. Simple is the best approach, and you don't have to be an expert. The IELTS exam or the IELTS speaking test, and same with the writing test, it's not a general knowledge test. I must talk about all the bullet points on the card in speaking part 2. Well, not really. Those points are there to help you to think of ideas. So you don't have to use those. I mean, you can use them if you want, but you don't have to. But the most important thing here is that you must stay on the topic presented on the card. If you go off the topic, you'll lose marks for coherence, or you could lose a band score actually. So stay on topic. in part 2. I should give long answers in speaking part 1 to impress the examiner. Now in part 1 of the speaking test, you should give a concise, clear answer. This means that you don't have to go into too much detail, it's not necessary. Conversely, don't give very brief answers or one-word answers. So around one sentence or 2 sentences maybe is really enough, that's fine. Part 3 is where you can go into detail. Part 1 is really just pretty straightforward. You just simply answer the question directly, but not too short, not too long. If the examiner stops me during my talk in part 2, it means I made a big mistake and I could get a low band score. I recently had a student who was very concerned and anxious about this, but actually don't worry. The reason why is the examiner is keeping the time, and if he or she stops you during your talk, then that means they have enough information to evaluate your score, and they now have to move to part 3 of the test. Or maybe you've gone over the allotted 2 minutes slightly, and the examiner is thinking of the timing. So the examiner is the one that keeps the time. You don't have to worry about the timing, and if you go over slightly, they'll just stop you, or if they've got enough information, they'll stop you and they'll move on. So don't let that worry you. I need to use high-level advanced grammar and vocabulary to get a high band score in speaking. So not at all. I mean, the questions must be answered naturally, and not like you've memorized so-called, band 9 words or high-level words, and you're just throwing them in there to impress the examiner. That would probably work against you. As I mentioned before, the grammar that you use depends on the question being asked. So focus on relevancy and grammatical precision and a simple, clear, direct answer. You don't have to worry about using high-level grammar, so-called high-level grammar, whatever that is. Just keep it simple. I'll get a lower score if I ask the examiner to repeat the question. No, you can actually ask the examiner to repeat the question, but don't do it too often. Once or twice is enough. Any more than that, it will give the impression that you have issues with your listening comprehension. So yeah, once or twice is enough. You could just say, sorry, could you say that again? Or could you repeat that again? That's fine. I should demonstrate good body language, give clear eye contact, and dress very smartly to impress the examiner. Now, the examiner doesn't care about any of these things. They're only evaluating your English skills. Now, the IELTS speaking test is marking you on 4 areas, which is fluency, pronunciation, grammar, and vocabulary. So that's the 4 areas you need to be working on. You can wear what you like. So to briefly summarize, you don't need a British accent to get a good score. I don't advise using idioms in the speaking test. Focus on precision. It's not about throwing in all sorts of different grammar structures and trying to be really impressive. Keep it simple and precise. In part 2, you must stick to the topic on the card. You don't have to talk about every single point if you don't want to. Of course you can if you feel it helps you. In part 3, you state an example and you develop it. And don't give too many examples. Focus on one central idea. It's a little bit like the essay writing part, where you focus on one central idea and you develop it and you support it. And it's similar to that in part 3. And of course, you don't need so-called high-level words or grammar. The aim is simple, clear, direct communication. Just answer the questions simply and clearly. So you can actually develop your speaking at home for free by following these steps. First of all, get some real IELTS speaking questions. So maybe you have an IELTS Cambridge practice book like IELTS 12. Find a speaking test. If possible, ask your friend to play the role of examiner, so your friend will ask the questions. Get your smartphone and record your answers. Record yourself doing the test. Then play back the recording and take notes on any issues of fluency or grammar or pronunciation. Now, once you've identified your weak areas, work on fixing them. If you've got problems with pronunciation, work on that. If it's problems of grammar issues or maybe hesitation, or you have a sense of anxiety, again, fix your weak areas and do this regularly, and you'll see a lot of improvements. Okay, well, thanks for watching. And if you need any more information, you can go to my website. There's some one-to-one speaking practice sessions, or there's a writing correction service. So head over to IELTSfocus.com. Okay, thanks a lot.